We are in the midst of a full-blown leadership crisis. According to a survey recently published by U.S. News and World Report, 1 out of every 5 Americans indicated that they do not trust at all our hospitals, pharmacies, and other healthcare institutions to act in the public's best interest. When asked about our colleges and courts, that number raises to 1 in 3 saying that they don't trust those institutions at all. And when considering our news media and our elected officials in Congress and the administration, half of our population indicated that they have no trust at all in these leaders. A big part of the problem is that more than 4 out of 5 Americans view our leaders as being more concerned about their personal power and influence than what's best for people. How did things get this way? And what can we do about it? We need true leaders in our businesses, our classrooms, and our government. We need true leaders in our homes and especially in our churches. Welcome to the True Leader Podcast, where together we are going to learn from the greatest leader of all time how to be true leaders ourselves and rise to meet this crisis of the moment. Let's get started. Welcome to the very first episode of the True Leader Podcast. My name is Dan Hager, and it is my pleasure to introduce you today to one of my very best friends and mentors, who is in fact a true leader himself, Bryn White. How are you doing today, Bryn?
Good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for pulling this together and setting up so nicely. This is fantastic.
Oh, hey, I'm excited for us to have this conversation because I know when we talk about leadership failures, when we see just what a mess things are right now,
Yep.
It's something that you've got a pretty specific perspective on because you've had quite a bit of leadership experience yourself, right? Including in the business and corporate world.
Yes.
What's some of that you've been involved with before?
Well, for about 20 years, I worked with the world's largest corporations and actually worked with a lot of CEOs. At one point, I was with the CEOs who were on the covers of Fortune and Business Week every week. And that was very surreal.
I bet.
And I wrote a book one time, and it had to do with leadership in one way. And so I actually got to have conversations with some of these famous CEOs and collect some of their thoughts, and that was interesting. It was interesting, too.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. And that's one of the things that I'm so excited about with this podcast, because I get to hear you tell stories all the time, and you just offhandedly mention names of people that I can remember reading about in my business school classes in college, and you know them personally. So you've got a really great lens into leadership as we know it in this country, but that actually wasn't the context in which I first met you. Because when you and I first met several years ago, you were working in a completely different leadership capacity because you've done quite a bit as a leader in churches too, haven't you?
Yes, after about 20 years in the corporate world, I got some clarity about what I should do with the rest of my life. And so we've spent the last 30 years focused more on mission work and on the development of spiritual leaders for churches and for other kinds of groups and organizations. And that's been totally different from what I was doing in the corporate world, for sure.
Yeah, and when you say mission work here, are we talking overseas stuff, or what all do you have in mind?
Yes, altogether, I've traveled in 87 countries, and I've tried to learn a little bit of 25 different languages, and I can get by in probably 6 languages, and I've been doing it most of my life. I actually did a lot of international work for these large corporations the first 20 years. So God used it in a very interesting way to get focused on what's most important to Him.
Absolutely. Oh, and that was part of what impacted me so much when we first met, because when I was living in the Baltimore, D.C. area, sort of at the height of my own corporate career,
Mm-hmm.
God brought me into your orbit when you were working in a capacity as specifically an outreach minister.
Mm-hmm.
So working to train Christians in how to be on mission
Mm-hmm.
right where they are,
Right.
in their homes, in their workplaces. And I've got to see firsthand just how that preparation that God's given you with that training and with that focus has been able to just bring scriptures, and especially bring the example of Jesus to life,
Mm-hmm.
to help others of us be able to find that focus, and find that purpose, and find that mission too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my favorite things about you, Bryn. Like, you've got such cool stories. Like, who else do I know that I can ask that can tell me stories where they mention names like John DeLorean and Jack Welch, but then also understands what it's like to be doing international mission work, understands what it's like to work there with local churches. It's really a unique set of experiences that God's blessed you with. So when you hear about the leadership crisis that we're faced with, like when you see the headlines, like when you've got that diverse but extensive experience in leadership, what are some of the things that it makes you think of? Like, what are some of the things that you see when you just see what a mess it seems like we've gotten ourselves into?
Well, it is a leadership crisis, and it's all across the board.
Yeah.
It's starting with corporations, all the way into churches, nonprofits, everything else. There is a vacuum of sorts in terms of leaders who actually have the courage to do what is right, the self-awareness to do what is right for the human beings that they are responsible for. There's always been issues with this historically, but in my lifetime, it's been very, very obvious that the leadership vacuum has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's had a pretty harsh effect, I would say, in some ways, on churches. There are a number of things right now that have been going on since the COVID era that still haven't quite gotten sorted out in terms of leaders standing up for what is right and taking courageous actions no matter what the feedback is. There's some very, very basic leadership things that haven't really been put into play fully. Need some help.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that perspective so much, Bryn, because as you're approaching it, what we're talking about here with leadership isn't just something that just applies to elected officials or even business leaders, but the kind of leadership you're talking about is the kind of stuff that involves teachers in classrooms and coaches on teams and preachers in pulpits and elders shepherding congregations, but also people that are leading families and leaders in their own homes. And we've really, we've got disruption at all of those levels just in terms of needing that courage and focus, right?
Right. So it almost seems like it's too big of an issue to get your arms around, but it actually is approachable. It's doable when you take a very simple approach and a personal approach and a daily pattern approach.
Yeah.
What are people's daily patterns? What are they filling their days with? How are they operating every day? And so that's really what moves us into the true leader process. Is there has to be a simple way of helping individuals to recalibrate And that's kind of what we've been trying to do.
Oh, that's beautiful, Bren. And that leads me right into one of the passages that I know we wanted to focus on today. Because when you talk about just historically, while we're all feeling this leadership crisis right now, we're all being affected by the vacuums in our churches, in our homes, in our businesses.
Right.
I think it's not new to God.
Mm.
And it's something that God has very clearly addressed at other points in the history of his people.
Absolutely.
So there are patterns and there are solutions that he has already revealed and made available to us if we just have ears to hear, right?
Right.
So for that, it might be helpful to take a look at an Old Testament passage. This is from the Hebrew prophet Ezekiel. And we're going to be looking at something from chapter 34. Ezekiel being a prophet that's at the time where things in Judah have really gone downhill. They have found themselves in exile. There have just been generations of poor leadership at all levels have accumulated, and consequences have caught up with the people. But even as the first part of what we're about to read shows God really passing judgment on what's been wrong, he also ends with that clear example and that hope that I think we need. So that might be good for us to read. This is Ezekiel chapter 34.
Thank you.
Then this message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds, the leaders of Israel. Give them this message from the sovereign Lord. What sorrow awaits you, shepherds, who feed yourselves instead of your flocks? Shouldn't shepherds feed their sheep? You drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the best animals, but you let your flocks starve. You've not taken care of the weak. You've not tended the sick or bound up the injured. You've not gone looking for those who have wandered away and are lost. Instead, you've ruled them with harshness and cruelty. So my sheep have been scattered without a shepherd, and they are easy prey for any wild animal. They have wandered through all the mountains and all the hills across the face of the earth, yet no one has gone to search for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, you abandoned my flock and left them to be attacked by every wild animal. And though you were my shepherds, you didn't search for my sheep when they were lost. You took care of yourselves and left the sheep to starve. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I now consider these shepherds my enemies, and I will hold them responsible for what has happened to my flock. I will take away their right to feed the flock, and I will stop them from feeding themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths. The sheep will no longer be their prey. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search and find my sheep. I will be like a shepherd looking for his scattered flock. I will find my sheep and rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on that dark and cloudy day. I will bring them back home to their own land of Israel from among the peoples and nations. I will feed them on the mountains of Israel and by the rivers and in all the places where people live. Yes, I will give them good pasture land on the high hills of Israel. There they will lie down in pleasant places and feed in the lush pastures of the hills. I myself will tend my sheep and give them a place to lie down in peace, says the sovereign Lord. I will search for my lost ones who strayed away, and I will bring them safely home again. I will bandage the injured and strengthen the weak, but I will destroy those who are fat and powerful. I will feed them, yes, feed them justice. So now, Bryn, as we hear this prophet from 2,500 years ago, a different part of the world, different culture than us.
Yeah, I love that passage.
It's a great passage, right? Like, it's one of my favorites. He's not talking about literal sheep, is he?
No, and he's also not mincing words. It's a very, very straight ahead warning and really insight into God taking control, leading his people personally, and it's kind of a setup for some other things that happened in history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as God is taking control from these shepherds, we should understand this then, right? He's talking about the religious leaders of God's people at that time,
Right.
the political leaders,
Oh, yeah.
the merchant class, just all the people, the family leaders,
Yeah.
like all those areas where we are struggling with the lack of leadership in our day and age.
Yep.
2,500 years ago, they were struggling with that too, right?
Right. Right. And you notice the things that he's pinpointing, he's actually talking about some of the things that are missing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can kind of figure out that it sounds like they're not caring about people.
Yeah.
It sounds like the leaders are kind of in love with themselves or focused on themselves, trying to, do anything for themselves.
Yeah.
They're very self-centered.
Right.
And that is really an impossible position to lead from.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that later too. But he identifies some things very quickly and kind of goes down through a list that's really pretty amazing.
As well as the consequences when that's the case, right? Because as a result of that,
Right.
the people that need leadership, they're hurting.
Yep.
They're scattered. They don't have direction.
Yeah, the effects of it, yeah.
I mean, there's pain and there's injury. And it just occurs to me, like within the context, like let's even just stick with the church context for a second, right?
Mm.
If leaders in the church fail to shepherd, then we've got people getting scattered.
Right.
We've got people going hungry. We've got people being subject to attack,
Right.
not being looked after, and that can be devastating.
Yep.
So what God is calling out here then isn't just an issue for ancient Judah, like it's an issue for us today. But also, I think the other thing that's really stunning with this is that when we really think about what that means with being a shepherd, it's also not just somebody else's problem, right?
Right.
Like the way that God approaches this isn't just something where I can say, well, I wish our political leaders did different, or I wish our business leaders did different, or even I wish our elders did different.
Right.
Like, because God's got a pretty clear response to this lack of leadership. Because he says, so I'm going to do it, right?
Right. But the part of that list, though, was responsibility and accountability.
Yeah.
Right? And because the leaders were not taking responsibility properly, and like people today, they have their reasons, but they're not good reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
People can rationalize whatever they want to, but the reality is, even if somebody says, oh, I know I have great responsibility as a leader, they may not really comprehend what that means. It has to change in them.
Yeah.
They may not realize it. And so there's a lot to talk about inside of this, but the responsibility and accountability thing is one. But yeah, in the end, there are consequences of all sorts, including justice to those people who were in a leadership position who squandered it, who did not do the will of God. Now that's that could be in any way, and that's true with dads, husbands. It's true with famous leaders in the world, politically and otherwise. But it's also true in the community and in education, like you're saying, and in churches. And it's more important than most people realize.
Absolutely. But then I also think there's great, and this is one of my favorite things about the Hebrew prophets, because as clear and definitive as that accountability and judgment from God is, they are always quick to point out that other element of his character too, where there's also going to be hope. That even when things are a mess, he's going to be the answer. He's going to have the solution. He's going to have a way to lead us forward. And in this particular instance, because the leaders didn't lead, he was going to come himself to do that.
Right.
And we'll understand, and we'll see in some future passages, that's exactly what we see when we look at Jesus, right?
Right. 100%. And that actually is the biggest story of mankind's history. The biggest story is God, who made everything and sustains everything, really setting everything up in such a way that there is leadership, starting with his leadership.
Yeah.
And when people don't pay attention to him and don't really permit him to lead them in their living, their daily living, you have problems. You have problems. And it's true for anybody, everybody, all the time. The degree to which you and I pay attention to God and the way he leads, we will learn a bunch of things. He will take us a bunch of good places. He will get us through all kinds of good things. But it comes back to his sovereignty as the creator. And yeah, when you talk about Jesus, when you start to realize who Jesus Christ is, you begin to get the big picture, especially about leadership, because there is no one who has been a greater, more impactful leader than Jesus Christ. No one in history. And I can prove it to you. I can prove it to you. Give me about 35 minutes.
Well, hey, good thing we've got a couple more podcasts planned where you're going to get a chance to do that very thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that is huge, right? That 500 to 600 years after Ezekiel gave these words, Jesus emerged onto the scene.
Right.
And he showed us what it looks like when God's in charge.
Right.
Like he showed us what it looks like, and that is when the lost are found, and the hungry are fed,
Correct.
and the sick and injured are healed.
Correct.
And to your earlier point, that's where we get our pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what has impacted me so much about your leadership and your focus as God's given it to you has been that recognition that when we talk about the leadership of Jesus, it's not just a theological thing. Like it's not just a thing about how a church is structured or organized. That when I really understand who Jesus is and what he did and the way he leads, that affects who I am as a spouse.
Absolutely.
And who I am as a parent and who I am
Deeply.
as a community member, a community leader. It affects how we relate as a church.
Right.
Who I am as a manager or director or whatever occupation I have as a coach for kids' soccer teams.
The way you think about everything, about every situation, about every person you're interacting with changes everything.
So things are bad, but because of Jesus, we have a way and we have a pattern that they can be better.
Absolutely.
And that's what these discussions are going to be about, right? As we proceed through this podcast, we're going to look at some of those specific things that we can take from Jesus to respond to this massive, massive failure of leadership that we are all suffering with the consequences of. But then find how God's answer can make it better, right?
Absolutely. And the process is simple but very, very powerful. It's all about application. It's all about you and I doing certain things. And Jesus Christ did certain things every day. And he changed everything forever.
Well, I, for one, can't wait for it. So thank you for the time today, Brent. And thank you for the time to be a part of this with us.
Thank you.
And we invite you back for our next podcast where we'll start to take a closer look at Jesus as that true leader.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.